Hello guys, welcome to another Laravel lesson. In this lesson, we are going to learn about eloquent model relationships. Now, it is worth mentioning that the eloquent model relationship is nothing new. It basically defines the relationships between the tables in our database. But in addition, Laravel Eloquent gives us powerful methods we can use to query those relationships. So, whether you are working with the Laravel framework, Node.js, whatever technology you are using, you oftentimes need to define those relationships between the tables in your relational database, and that is the main goal of this lesson. We are also going to write codes to seed the database. This basically means to insert records programmatically into the database. This helps us to quickly test what we are doing. Also, we are going to query all those different types of relationships we will learn in this lesson. Down here are the types of relationships we are going to take a look at: one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, hasOneThrough, and hasManyThrough. I want to quickly mention that although this covers almost all the different types of relationships you will find in the Laravel documentation, I, however, encourage you to take a look at the Laravel documentation to learn things more in depth, right? Different ways we can actually use these relationships. So, with that in mind, let's get started. Before we start writing some codes, I want to mention that although this lesson we are not going to do something so advanced, but it assumes that you already know the very basics of Laravel, right? The very basic stuff. With that knowledge, you can follow along. What I have on the screen is a brand new Laravel project. Open in VS Code. Of course, you can use any code editor of your choice. I have connected to the database using my credentials, Laravel demo with my credentials. So you set up a Laravel project, you create a new Laravel project and connect to the database. The next thing we are going to do is to define the models and their relationships. A brand new Laravel project already comes with the user model, so we are not going to create the user model again. I will open this project in the terminal and run php artisan make model profile. With the M flag, that is this -m, we make both the model class file and the migration file. Enter. Next, let's make a driving license model. Driving license -m, enter. And then post category. Post category, enter, and post, enter. With that done, we are going to define the relationships in two places, the most important being in the migrations file. I will head over to the migrations file, expand this a little bit. So the first thing we are going to look at is one-to-one relationship. So we assume that a user should have only one profile. That is an example of one-to-one, when there is only one value that in the other table that the value in another table can have. So a user has only one profile. A profile belongs to only one user, right? So we say table, this is profile table. Let's say text about the person. That is not the important thing we are here for. The important thing is the relationship. So we say table foreign ID user ID. User ID constrained. So this is saying that this is actually referencing the user in the users table using Laravel convention. This is the one-to-one relationship. A profile belongs to only one user. How can we define that in the model? In the model, let me go to the profile model, or actually to user, that might make more sense. Here we can say public function profile return this has one profile class. So this is how you define that one-to-one relationship. In the table, we reference the user ID, and then in the user model, we can say profile return this has one. We can do the reverse in the profile table. Let me go to the profile model, actually, not table. To get the user that owns this profile, what we can do is public function user. We can say return this belongs to user class. So given a profile, we can just get the user that owns it through this Eloquent relationship. Actually, instead of waiting until we define the other relationships before we write queries, let's go ahead and make seeder for the profile and query the database before we proceed to the other things. What I will do is to go to database seeder. This is database seeder. You can make a different seeder for this, but just so we go straight to the point, I will do that inside the database seeder file. This should be for, actually should be inside run. By default, Laravel already gives us factory for user, so we can reuse that instead of creating another one. I want to first check something. If user count is less than 10, then come on, what was that? Okay, so only do this if the user we have in the database is less than 10. Then for profile, I'll go ahead and let's say users to be equal to user. Oh, I want to make profile for each of the user so that each one of them we have one profile. So for each user as user, instead of inserting inside this loop, I will like to insert one. So let's say bulk data to be an array that should be outside the loop, outside like that. So we can just say bulk data. We first build an array and then insert once instead of calling insert inside this loop. So what I want to do is user ID to be user ID. For profile, what do we have? We have just about. That's fine. So about, for this, let me comment this out. I will first bring in the faker. So I have private faker, the same faker we make use of in the factory classes. I want to say function construct this faker is equal to factory create. So this will give us the faker. We can come down here and say about to be this faker sentence or paragraphs. Paragraphs. How many paragraphs? Doesn't matter, but let's just say number between 1 and 3. Faker return number between 1 and 3. And for the paragraph, we have to pass the second argument there, so it will give us text true. Let me actually remove this so you see it clearly. So for example, let's say we are getting only 3 paragraphs. We want to return that as text. That is the second argument. But I want to randomly return number of paragraphs between 1 and 3. Okay, that should do it. No, there's one more thing. Before I add that, let me show you. db table profiles. What we want to do is insert bulk. So we insert the whole records at once. But when you do it like this, the timestamps columns will not be created for you. They created at and updated at. So we are going to add that manually, although we are not making use of it, just in case you want to use something like this in your real project. We use this to, it is created at, not ID. Come on, what am I typing? And updated at. Updated at. Okay, that should do it for the profiles table. To seed the database, we actually need to first run the migration because we have not done that before. PHP artisan migrate. Note that we are still going to drop the database when we define the migration schema for the other tables. But for now, let's just go ahead and run the migration. We have the tables. If I go to the database, refresh tables, I will have all the tables empty. We go ahead and run PHP artisan db seed to seed the database. Artisan db seed. If I go back to profile, we have 10 records. If I go to user, we have 10 records. All right. Before we can query the database, let's make a controller. For this demonstration, I am going to use only one controller. In your project, you can make different controllers for different entities and all that. But just to keep things simple, I'm going to make PHP artisan make controller. Let's call that app controller. We have made the controller. Over to the code, I will go to app controller. The very quick thing we are going to do here is to demonstrate to query the one-to-one relationship. We have already defined those relationships and seeded the database. So I will say public function user profile user. So what we are trying to do is to query the one-to-one relationship where user has one profile. There are different ways you can do this. Something so unnecessary is to try to do something like this. Let profile to be profile where user ID is user ID first. This is so unnecessary because we already have that relationship defined in the user model, so there is no point doing something like this. Instead, I will actually return the whole thing. I will just return by the way, so that we can quickly test what we are doing we are going to return JSON responses. We are not going to make some blade file, some front end stuff, right? So I'll just return response JSON. We say user profile, because in the user model we already have that relationship, this profile. Here we are just accessing it. I will go over to Postman and call this the endpoint, but before that, let's actually define that in the API route. So head over to API routes. What I will do here is to actually, let me delete this. We're not doing any form of authentication guard. So route get users user, and we say app controller class, close this, app controller class user profile. So just take note that we are using route model binding, and the name here, that is user, will correspond to the name here, right? Another way to do this is to say ID, and then you have to fetch the user from the database first before you can make use of it. But like this, we already have that done for us. With that defined, that is the endpoint, we go over to Postman and call that endpoint. We open Postman. Let me add a request. Let's call that user profile, whatever. So HTTP users, make sure to add /API, right? That is the way the Laravel API route works. By default, it should have this /API. Let me send that. Send. Oh, we need to start the server first. We don't have the server running, so I will open another tab. There I will say PHP artisan serve. Now we have the server running. We send again. That is taking some time. Okay, so we get the user profile for user ID 1. Obviously we can get for the user ID 3, etc, etc. Let me change this back to 1. So that is just one way we can actually retrieve that relationship. Another thing we can do is let me remove this. Oh, come on, remove this from here. We're going to return profile. Another thing we can do is, instead of user profile, let's do user load. This is lazy loading, the concept of lazy loading, but I don't think it's actually so useful for this one-to-one relationship, just for demonstration purposes. Profile. So this is another way we can load that relationship. If I go back to Postman and send, we actually get profile. So that is one-to-one relationship. Let's move on to something else that is one-to-many according to our to-do. For the one-to-many, I will go to not driving licenses. We get to that later. I will go to post and post categories. For the post categories, let me have just title here, nothing more. String title. I will have title in the post as well. I will go over to post. This is post table. Now have title. Here we define the relationship between post and post categories. So we can say this foreign ID post category ID constrained. This is the relationship. This is how we make reference foreign key pointing to the post categories table. Let me distinguish this a little bit. I will just have post title and post body. post body will be a text body. Okay, with that defined, let's go over to database seeder. I will just copy what I have for profile. Let me copy from here. Come down here, paste that, give some space so it's not confusing. This will be for post categories. And then we have another one for posts. Actually, post categories, I'm just going to insert few records. Post category, create, we just say title to be category 1. Do the same thing, category 2. Just 2 is enough. If post category count is less than 2, we can actually truncate the table then create another one, but that's not really a problem. The next thing I want to do here is to insert posts. So let me rename this to posts. I will change this line a little bit for $I to be 0, I less than, how many posts can we have? Let's have 100 I plus plus. Open that bracket. Once again, we say post has only title and category ID. So let's change this to post category ID, but for the post category, let's actually do something else here. Up post categories to be equal to post category all. Down here we can do this faker random element post categories, then we get the ID. To avoid confusion, if this is looking confusing, what I'm actually doing here is post category to be equal to any of the post categories at random. Then I will go ahead to make use of it down here, get the ID. So let's check what we have done. Get all the post categories. Now first we insert 2 records if there is nothing in the database for post categories. Then we get all the post categories. We go ahead and generate about 100 posts. For each case, we pick a post category at random. There's something missing here, title and body. So this faker, let's say sentence, I don't know. And for the body, we can say this faker, we have not method call. Let's have paragraphs. I'll just add code 2 here as text. So paragraph, the second argument, yeah, as text. Finally, we say posts, insert. So we insert the posts. Because we just modified some tables, and we're just doing some testing here, what I will do is to drop the entire database and run the migration again. So I'll drop the database first, delete everything, and I will go ahead to run the migration. come over here, PHP artisan migrate and PHP artisan db seed. We have a little problem. What could that be? It says unknown column about. About, do we have about there for posts? I'm trying to, okay, the problem is we have a bug. I renamed this to post, but down here we are inserting bulk data, which comes from up here where we have user user profile, I think. So this should be posts, not bulk data, right? Let me go back and run this migration one more time. Actually, seed, not migration. We have seeded successfully. I'll refresh the tables. We go to users, we still have user profile, we have profiles. Why is it 20? I think it's because of the failure we had. No problem about that. Actually, I don't like the idea of one-to-one having 10 and 20 records for users and profile respectively. So I want to do this again. PHP artisan migrate, PHP artisan db seed. Good. I will refresh these tables one more time. Profiles 10, users 10. But for posts, you can see we have 100 records. For post categories, we have those two, and each post has post category ID. Our seeder is fine. Let's move on to query, one-to-many relationship. For that, I will go back to the controller, search app controller, minimize this. We already have user profile, so let's make another function here. Function that is for posts. Function post. We can just take post category ID. Post category. Post category. Of course, you already know how to just get post category. That's not our focus here. We just want to demonstrate one-to-many relationships. So we can do something similar to what we did up there for user profiles. Let's say post to be equal to post category posts. But let me go to post category. We have not defined that helper method in the Eloquent model. So this is post category. Inside here we should have a function that defines the relationship. Posts, we say return this has many public function. Come on, public function. This has many posts. This is how we can define that relationship. We can do the reverse of it in the post model as well, right? So if we go over to post model, we can say something like, we can say this, actually not something like that. We can say post category. So given a post, we can get the post category through this helper method that Eloquent provides. We simply say return this belongs to post category class. By the way, note that you can name this whatever you want, right? But by convention and because it makes sense, we can just name it post category. I will head over to the controller. What we just want is to get the post. I'll go ahead and return response JSON posts. Go to the route and let's copy what we have here, put it down here. We say post, let's say post category with ID, actually post category. This is not where we talk about the ID. Route model binding. and the method is post. Okay, let's go to postman and call that. I will copy and duplicate this. Duplicate, rename this to posts, and change the URL from users to posts. Hit enter. You can see we get posts for that specific category. And that reminds me, we can actually return posts as a nested field in the post category. So we can do something like, can basically call post category posts, and we go ahead and return post category. What will happen is that we are going to have post category and then with the post as nested field inside it, right? So this is for post category and this is post nested inside it. We can do something similar for profile actually. So up here, I will comment this out. I will return user. So we are going to have user and profile as the nested field. I will go back to user. Go back to user. What's going on? Okay, just call the think my laptop. Oh, I actually made a mistake there. Let me rename this to users again. I was using the same request for user. So you can see that we have user and we have profile nested inside it. There are different ways we can actually load the post categories. Another way we can do this, sorry, the posts, not the post categories. Let me undo what I've done before. We can do something like this, post to be equal to post category load. We load the posts, the lazy loading approach. We go back here to post. This time I'm actually going to add separate URL for this. Copy this, get down here, paste, change this to posts and send. You can see we still get the same result through that approach. Another way we can do this is to actually let me do something. We can actually pass an ID here. Remove this guy. ID. And what we can do is we can say post category is equal to post category find ID. So let me go to the route and change this to ID. Go back to the controller and then we can say width, not here. We actually have to bring width before find. We say width post, then we call find. I'm going to return the post category. We go back to postman and we send. We get the same result. So this is what we call eager loading. You can actually load multiple relationships if there are more than one. Assuming you want to load other things, you make use of an array. If I go back and call the endpoint, you get the same result. You can actually specify the columns from the post table that should be loaded. So we can say posts, we say colon, ID, there will always be ID there. Always make sure you have ID. The next thing is the relationship between the two tables. That is the foreign key in the post table that references the post category ID, which is post category ID. So make sure that you have that foreign key. After these two things, then you specify other columns you want to load. For example, let's take just the title for the post. I will save, go back here, and we get the post with the ID, the relationship, and just the title. Of course, along with the category. And of course, we can do the reverse of what we have been doing so far. So let me actually comment this out. Just ignore that the title, the function name is post. Let's just find any post. Post to be equal to post first. Given a post, we can get the category. So here we are going to return post. If post category, actually post category, not a function call. If I go back to postman, I will send, so we get the post category. Of course, if we want to get the post with the category, we can actually return post here, post category, send, we get the post with the post category. So the reverse is, you can do the reverse of it, getting post and then the categories. Okay, so that is it for one-to-many. Now let's look at something a bit more complex, that is many-to-many relationship. To look at many-to-many relationship, we're actually going to modify our database structure a little bit. If you have worked with blogging platform, for example WordPress, you will notice that a post can actually belong to multiple categories. But according to our current relationship, that is not possible, because whenever we create a post, we are mapping that parent category ID, that is the post category ID. There is no way we can now assign multiple categories to a post, right? To actually achieve that many-to-many relationship between posts and categories, I will go to, let me quickly go to the model. Where is it? Okay, let me start from the database, actually, from the tables. So from the tables, what I will, what am I doing? This is post categories, this is posts. Instead of having this here, I will actually remove this post category ID, or let me add user ID. That is the author of the post, right? So let's just have the user ID here. We don't have post category ID anymore in the post table. If I go to the database seeder, let me change this to, let me bring in users. I think we already have users up, right? So we have users up here. I will just make use of that. We have users at the top, so instead of post category ID, we have user ID, which is going to be a random user to be any random user from the users we have up there. And here I will say user ID. As it is now, post has nothing to do with post categories. With the change we have made so far, that is having the user ID here, we have actually established the one-to-many relationship between user and the post, just similar to what we did for post categories. So a user can have multiple posts, right? For example, if I come over to posts, not here, I'll leave this like this for now. Let me go to user, not to post. If I come over here, I can, let me copy this, paste down here. You can say post hasMany. So we now have one-to-many relationship. between user and post defined in the migration file. We can query this similar to what we did with post categories. Similarly, when we go to post, we can say that it belongs to, let's say, user. This belongs to user, right? Similar to what we have for post category and post. For many-to-many relationship, we are going to bring in additional table. That is the relationship between post and post categories, such that a post can belong to multiple categories and a category can have multiple posts. We are going to make additional table. The convention is that the table name has to be singular. Let me show you. PHP artisan make migration, and in alphabetical order of the models involved in the relationship. So for example, say you have article and user. Because article comes first in alphabetical order before user, the table name has to be article underscore user, right? That should be the table name. In this case, we have post category and post, but post we have to come for. So we say PHP artisan make migration, create post underscore post category table. Hit enter. We head over to that migration file. Go to database here, over here. This is the file. You can see the naming convention. Post and then post category in singular. If you don't do it like this, you can actually have a model, Eloquent model, maybe let's say post category, something like that, and you specify the table for that model, right? So what we're going to have here is table foreign ID post underscore ID, and table foreign ID post underscore category underscore ID. Okay, so you can add other columns as you require, but I'm just going to leave this. These are the most important things. This refers to the post and this refers to the post category. We can go ahead to migrate. PHP artisan migrate. Now let's go back to the database seeder and insert some records for the new table. I will go to database seeder. At this line we inserted some posts. I will cut this. We don't need it up there anymore. This is for posts. I will come down here after where we have inserted the posts. This will be for post category for that table. What I am going to do is, let me get all the posts to be equal to post, not that, post all the posts. What is going on there? Import post. Yeah. Now for each post as a post, what I will do, let's call this post cat data for the post category data, and then post cat will be equal to, we have post ID, we have post category ID, but we want some posts to have multiple categories, right? What we can do is let's generate some random number here. We say categories count to be equal to this faker number between 1. They should have at least one category, and then post categories count number between 1 and the number of categories we have in the database. Then what I would do is go one more time inside a loop. For I equal to 0, I less than categories count, I plus plus, and we insert. This should be post ID that we have up there. Post, get the ID. As for the post category ID, I will actually modify this a little bit. Instead of having post categories count, I will say categories to be faker random elements, not element this time, random elements from post categories. The first argument is the array we want to return the random element from. Let's pass more arguments. The second one will be how many items. We should also use faker here. Faker number between 1 and post categories count. So we are going to get post categories at random, and this is number of items we are going to get. This will return an array that we can make use of. So instead of all these things down here, I will say for each categories as category, we go ahead and make use of the category ID. Shift this a little bit and shift this a little bit. Finally, we save data to the database table. DB table post category insert. We insert that record. So what is going on here? Basically, we get all the categories, we get all the posts. We build an array of the data we are going to insert, right? We pick number of categories at random. It can be one category, it can be all the categories according to this here. This will give us one number between 1 and all the categories. For each of those categories, we insert a record into our post category table. Alright guys, so let me quickly mention that there are actually more conventional methods for doing some of the things I'm doing in the database seeder, right? You can check the Laravel documentation to see what is available for you that you can make use of. But what we are doing here, we actually still get the same result done. We just want to have data the way we want it in the database. Okay, we go over here and run the seeder php artisan db seed. We have an error. What could that be? So this has to do with migration. I think it's because, remember, we added the user ID column to the post table. What I will do is to drop the database, go over here, select all the tables, not save, just select, drop the database tables, delete. I'll clear the console and run the migration again. Artisan migrate php artisan db seed. This time we seeded the database successfully. If I go to post category, we have data there. Before we go ahead to query the many-to-many relationship, let me actually tidy something up here. I will rename this to profiles data instead of bulk data, so it makes more sense. Profiles data, that is for user profile. I will leave the user the way it is. I will come down here, post categories, I will leave that the way it is. For posts, this should be post data, rename that to post data, insert post data, close this up a little bit. Then for post category, this is post cat data. I will leave that like that, close this up. And okay, so just to tidy something up a little bit, and to be sure we did not break anything there, I will drop this one more time, select everything, delete tables, just quickly do that. Come here, migrate and seed. Okay, we are good. Refresh the tables, we have the data. Let's go over to post category. So what we are going to do here is to change this. Instead of hasMany, we have belongsToMany. This is how we define the many-to-many relationship. A category belongs to many posts, right? We go over to post, we can have the reverse of that relationship definition. We can say public function post categories. We return, it should be small letter, return this belongs to many post category. So we can have it both ways. This is how we define the Eloquent model relationship, although the main thing is in the migrations file in our table. We can now go over to the controller. Here I will here let me just remove this. As for user, let me actually remove all this. What we want to get is, let's just get a post with all the categories. So let's say post, nothing here, we just return any random post. I'll just get any posts. I'll say post to be post first, return the response JSON, but we want to get that post with the categories. So we say with, let me return post for now. We see what that looks like. Of course, it's just going to be the post without the categories. If I go back to API route, go to api.php routes, I will remove this. Actually, we should have post ID, not just post. Let me use route model binding for post/post. Here we get a post, so we don't need this anymore. Go back to postman, post/1, send. Something is wrong. Let me check what happened. If I go to storage, let me quickly see it from here. Close this up a little bit. not that. Send it one more time. Go to storage. Post does not exist. Okay, I think we have this from here, from the route. What we have is post, not posts. This is the method we have. I'll go here and send. We get a post. Let's get a post with the categories. So we can just do something similar to what we've been doing all the while. We can say post categories. That will load the post with the post categories. You can see this is the categories for the post. This post only has one. We can actually call load and say post categories. We get similar results, and whatever we have done for post, we can do the reverse. That is for post categories, right? Because the structure is just similar in terms of the relationships. This is post, we have post categories. This is post categories, we have posts. So that is it for many-to-many relationship. The next item we have in our to-do is hasOneThrough. For that, let me go to the models. We have this driving license. Actually, I don't think this driving license will make the most sense for this. I will instead make a different model. Let's make an office model such that a user is assigned an office, right? So PHP artisan make model office -m. We have an office model. We go to the migrations first. Over here, we're just going to have the name of the office. Table, string, office number, whatever. Office number, just that. I will open the user model. Here we define the relationship between user and office. Basically, we say table, foreign ID, office ID, constraint. So this is saying office ID is a foreign key that references ID in the offices table. The way it is now, if I go ahead and drop the database, let me select everything here, drop database. First delete, yes, delete everything. If we run the migrations, we are going to get an error. PHP artisan migrate. PHP artisan migrate. The reason we are getting the error is because users table is being created before the offices table. But in the users table, we are trying to reference the office table, right? We are going to change this up a little bit so that offices is created before user. What I will do is to rename the file. That's just one of the ways you can do something like this. I will rename the file so that the offices table file will move up. Change this to 2013, I don't know. So that comes first now, offices, then users. I will go to the database and drop everything one more time. Delete and clear the terminal. Run the migration again. We have our migration. Let us insert some data into the offices table. I will go back to the database seeder file. Before we insert users at the top here, what I want to do is db table. The table name is offices, and we say insert. And we just insert like 2 records, office number. Let's just manually insert office A. I will insert another record. So let me make this an array. another record here, office number, office B. Actually, this array should be here. Now we have two records. I will go to the user's factory, open the user's factory. This is the user factory. When creating a user, we want to insert office ID for that user. So let me actually bring in some offices. Office, or we just have two. And then I will pick an office equal to this faker random element from offices. That will give us just an office, and we can say office ID to be office ID. That is in the user factory that comes with a new Laravel project. With that setup, we can now go ahead and run the database seeder. PHP artisan db seed. Our database is seeded successfully. Let's see. Refresh the tables and we go to offices. We have two records there. If we go to users, we can see the office ID. Now, let's go over to the relationship query. Going back to the office model, actually, our goal is this. Given an office, we want to get a profile, right? Remember that there's no direct relationship between office and profile, but we can get that through user. That is the hasOneThrough. We are going to say public function profile, and we return this hasOneThrough. The first argument is going to be what we are targeting, the table we are interested in. In this case, profile. We say profile class. So office has profile through what? We say user class, and office has profile through user. Definition, let's go over to app controller. Let me have another function here. We'll say public function. What do we call this? We say office profile, office user profile, something like that. Office user profile. We are going to take office, but this time let's just do something a little bit different. Let's take an ID. This is the ID of the office, and we say office to be equal to office, not profile, office find ID. We get an office with that ID. What we can actually do is to return the profile of the user that owns that office, or that is assigned to that office. So we can say return response JSON office profile, right? We go to the API route, api.php, and define that endpoint. So let me copy this. Let's call that offices/ID, because we are expecting ID in the controller. Let me go to the app controller. We are expecting the ID here. I will actually copy this method, go back to API and paste this. Let's go over to Postman and try that. For that, I will duplicate this. We rename that to office, and for the URL, come on, we actually copy this URL, paste over here, change this to offices, the ID is 1, send, we get the office profile, right? This is just the profile. You can see the about returned. We can go ahead to make the kind of queries that we made for the previous types of relationships. For example, we did something like this. Let's say office here. Office, we say profile. In this case, we return just office. This will give us the office loaded with the profile. Click send here. We get office and the user profile. So this is hasOneThrough, right? A model has another model through another model, and then you can do all the different ways you can load relationships here. That is it for hasOneThrough. Before we move on to the next type of relationship, guys, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so. That will help this video to get recommended to other people and also help me grow this channel. Thank you as you do that. Now let's look at the other item, which is actually the last item we have in our to-do. This is hasManyThrough. Actually, this is just similar to what we have seen for hasOneThrough. Let's think about something here. What if we can say office posts, right? I don't know, the office user or the person's post. Remember that office has no direct relationship with posts, but we can get posts of the person that is occupying that office through the relationship. So what we can do is public, this is not in app controller, sorry. We need to go to office first. This is office. I will actually copy everything I have here because I'm too lazy to type. Let's call that post. What we can just do is hasManyThrough. hasManyThrough. What we are targeting is post, and then we have user, because there's a relationship between user and the post, right? So we are saying that office has many posts through user. That is so simple and straightforward. I will now go over to app controller. I'll copy this and paste it down here. Let's call that office user posts. Office user post. Just like before, we take the ID of the office and we return the posts. Let's go to API route, api.php route, and we're going to have conflict in the method, in the route, not the method. Let me actually delete this one. We don't need it anymore, by the way. We go back to api.php. When we hit office/post, we call the method office user posts. I will go over to Postman and we go ahead to call that endpoint. You can see we get the office and we get collection, array of all the posts for that office, the user of that office. Alright guys, so that was the last item we have in our to-do. Before we call it a day, let's just quickly recap some of the things we have covered. I also want to mention that there is a whole lot more details you can find in the Laravel documentation, as well as things that this lesson did not cover. So I encourage you to look at the Laravel documentation and dig deeper. So one-to-one relationship is actually the simplest type of relationship where one model has another model and only one of that other model. We have seen in the example the relationship between user and profile. User has only one profile. Each profile belongs to only one user. And then we have one-to-many. An example of one-to-many is that user has many posts, right? We define that relationship in the post model using the user underscore ID foreign key. We have another one which is many-to-many. For example, a post can belong to many categories. But given a category, we can identify maybe 0 or more, that is multiple posts that belong to that category. So it's a two-way process. And then we have hasOneThrough. This is what we demonstrated using office and profile. This is ideal for situations where the two tables we are trying to connect has nothing in common. For example, office has no information about profile, neither does profile has any information about office, but we connect the two of them through the user model or the user table. And finally, we have hasManyThrough. This is just similar to hasOneThrough. The only difference is that the relationship on the other end can be multiple. For example, there can be many posts that belong to user. Given an office, we can find all the posts, let's say that belongs to that office, through the user that occupies that office, right? So this brings us to the conclusion of the lesson. I hope it made sense. Until next time, happy coding.